Hello, and welcome back to Appreciating Paintings. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Sean, and I have been a painter for over 20 years. You're here because you love looking at paintings, you love to learn about paintings and see new paintings, but sometimes you just don't know quite what to think. And that's why I'm here. I'm going to share my knowledge and my perspectives on painting with you and hopefully broaden the conversation. So let's just jump right into it. Today we're going to appreciate a fine work by the great Raphael. And this work is called the Madonna of the Chair. So here it is. And I always wonder about the Renaissance artists and their compositions and their drawing, because as a kid it was just like these were the greats, these are the best. And then you start to see other painters throughout time and you think, oh, those are pretty good too. But what is it about their compositions, what they were drawing, how they were doing it? Are they really the best? And it's kind of hard to know if we will ever really understand what they were thinking and doing with composition. But all we have to work with is their work, their art, and look at it and see what comes up. And one thing I can say for a lot of Renaissance painters, especially the greats, is that their paintings just have a sense of unity and harmony. So well balanced. Everything feels so deliberately placed in a way that just hangs together, feels good. This particular piece is something called the Tondo, and that just means the circular composition. And it's an interesting choice for this subject because it's such a inviting composition. It really creates this kind of intimate space that brings us into the picture. One of the first things I notice with the way that Raphael has placed this picture is the sweeping kind of form. There's like the sweeping arc of Mary, her arm coming across here, and then there's this kind of twisting thing that happens with the Christ child here, and then we kind of come back up to St. John the Baptist, and you can see how his hands and eyes are pointing that way, and that kind of brings us back around. It's kind of like this sort of spiraling design, and he's using the lines of the different figures to create this movement through the circle and it mirrors the circular composition. So that's just one thing to kind of look at. But we can also kind of take notice of some other things that are happening, like, for example, the positioning of the figures. Mary's head is leaning to the right here. Her body is really positioning in like almost like a wedge, like her head this way, and then her body coming down and to the right this way. And her body is facing forward, but her gaze is coming right at us. The Christ child is facing kind of up to his right, over our right shoulder, and his head is also in a certain position different to the direction of his body. His face is kind of facing us. He's looking off to his right, but his body is really turned and facing his mother. And then, of course, St. John his body is facing us and his head is turned and eyes gazing up at Mary. And so it's interesting to see how the eyes are all pointing in different directions, which does something also to kind of create more space here. And when I say create more space, that's another thing about this picture, is that there's a lot going on. There's a lot of forms and a lot of things, but it doesn't really feel cluttered in an uncomfortable way. Like somehow there's breath in the painting, and there's just enough closeness, and that's just perfect because she's hugging her child, and you want some level of that coziness, but it just doesn't feel uncomfortable. And that all has to do with the spacing and timing of everything within the circle, the sizes of things. Like you can imagine that if Mary's head was actually, her face was actually this big instead of this big, it would just occupy a little bit more dominance of the circle that could make things feel even more congested. So there's really a lot of thought in that Raphael puts into the sizes of everything and the forms and where they're facing, where they're turning, to really create this like spiraling, twisting composition. And while I'm speaking about forms, it's just lovely to see how much volume he kind of is able to capture in the forms. There really is this feeling of healthy forms, soft turning forms, and it's just pleasing to look at. Form is something that is pleasing to look at. And he creates a variety of forms between the wood of this chair, the drapery, the different folds of the drapery, the softness of the hair. All of those things also contribute to the overall entertainment factor, I guess you could call it. He makes this dark, warm background that also adds some breathing room to the picture. That's done pretty well. And, it's just interesting things like you can kind of see this curve that happens this way, which is also an arc, which relates to the circle. There's a lot of arcs repeating in here, but there's the arc of the arm, but also even how he designed the Christ child's feet is an arc that kind of carries through here. And so you can almost see this passage created by the two arcs, one that comes up like this, and then the other like this. And we're moving through that. It's just another way to look at it. I think part of also another part of this is how soft he makes everything. Sfumato, I believe it's called, is something that Da Vinci was creating, which is like the atmospheric feeling of things, and that's kind of used to create soft edges. There aren't really any, like here's probably one of the hardest edges in the picture, and it is a hard object, but he really does a good job to keep the edges soft all throughout, and it really makes everything kind of feel delicate, and that delicacy doesn't project to our eye in any uncomfortable way. If there was like a high contrast part, right, let's say right here, let's say that this shadow is made really dark like here, then this edge would be really sharp, and that dark spot right there would jump out to our eye in a way that might cause some like sharp acute attention, and that breaks the softness, the delicateness. So he makes his shadows soft. Even here, even though it's darker in value, you can see how soft it feels. And that is a good paint application, let's say. And then it's also fun to kind of just look at the different forms and the placement of them. You have the ovoid of Mary's head, of the Christ child's head, and then the timing. There's a space here, and then the timing of St. John's head. So there's kind of like a doot doot, and then the space, and then doot, like a. Everything is just different sizes, different forms, different combinations of forms, different things happening in different areas that really keeps us enthralled and entertained. So let's look at some details just to appreciate the fine work that he puts into really entertaining us, delighting us with some of these patterns. Really finely painted, but yet in areas that get lost, it doesn't feel so tightly rendered that it becomes unbelievable. So Raphael really does a nice job at keeping it soft, and that's ultimately about part of the relation. And I just wanted to show this scene right here because, man, we just can't get. It's not all just the visual elements. You can't get past the subject matter here of Mary embracing her child, the look in her eye, the way that their heads touch. This is like a really genuine, believable feeling of like a mother embracing her child. And there's just something about the way she's looking at us through her eyes and the innocence of the Christ child that's just really, really touching. It's really remarkable. And the painting is like a blend of warm and cool. You have the warm reds, and the warmth of the reds in the cloth and even in the hair, the warmth of the skin tones. And then you have the cool of this blue here and the greens, you know, that kind of offset it. So one is definitely dominant, the warmth, and it's a warm picture. It just has that enough variety to create some interest in that way. You know, so it's just fun to see where colors are repeated. The orange here kind of picks up here and down here and here and here. And, you know, that's also part of the game. But he kind of pulls out all the stops. We have like nice form in the drapery, different types of drapery folds. We have patterning on the material, even in the headdress. It's just pleasing to look at, stripes and different sorts of patterns, different textures of material, different textures of objects. Great design, really captures the believability of this scene. I think it's just a really pleasing and delightful picture to look at. If you have enjoyed watching this video, please share, like, and subscribe. Thank you for joining me. You know, I really want to make these videos for you. So if you have paintings that you want me to look at and talk about, I'd be happy to do so. Leave them in the comments. Let me know what you think about this painting. That'll be it for Madonna of the Chair. Let me know what you think. Thanks again. Thank you so much for joining me. And I look forward to sharing the next video with you. Take care.